This is the Bottom Shot Podcast.
Pulverary is up high. They come out of turn number 4. Stutter between the turns. The fans come to their feet.
It is Ted Christopher still in command. Keith Rocco right there on his back bumper.
Bringing Stafford Motor Speedway's past and present together.
They are side by side running for the finish line. It's a photo finish.
Deep into turn number 3. He goes in deeper than most. Christopher is in trouble. It is Keith Rocco to slingshot to the bottom, and he'll take down the win.
A Stafford Motor Speedway production where we will hear from the personalities from the past and present that found success on the legendary half-mile oval.
The scoreboard shows goose eggs as they wait. It's Pulverary. He wins it by inches over Richie Evans in the Spring Sizzler.
Unbelievable chain of events.
Now, here are your hosts, Paul Arute and Kyle Rickey. Welcome to episode number 2 of the Bottom Shot Podcast here at the Stafford Motor Speedway. Track announcer Kyle Rickey, joined by COO Paul Arute. And Paul, episode 1 went so well a couple weeks ago with you and Keith Rocco that you've brought us back now for episode number 2.
Yeah, the boss man, he gave it a listen. He listened to the whole thing straight through. Didn't understand what a podcast quite was. Asked where where's the pictures? Oh, it's an audio file. But he said we can do an episode 2, and here we are. We're going to do it.
The boss man, of course, your dad, Mark Arute here at the Stafford Motor Speedway. And before we talk about episode number 2, let's talk about episode number 1. A lot of folks took to it.
Yeah, it was great. We got some great feedback. It's awesome to get Keith in the at the track here telling his stories. The stories were incredible.
Yep.
Some of that's a lot of stuff that I haven't even come across before, and he was able to really get it all out. And we've had some great numbers, 200 plus views listens on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and over 500 views on Facebook and YouTube. And hey, it's great. People are excited.
Add them all up, and you get a couple of thousand views on a perspective that is a little bit more modern with Keith, kind of looking at the 90s and the 2000s. On this show, though, we're going to go back a couple of decades.
Yeah, we have a great guest coming in today. 2-time Stafford SK Modified champion Jerry Pearl, and also grandfather of 2 current drivers, Bryan Narducci and Alex Pearl.
Yep.
So we're going to get a look across 5 decades of racing.
2-time SK Modified champion here at the Stafford Motor Speedway back in the early 80s, I guess, when there was a bit of a transition here at the racetrack, when we were going from Tour-type Modifieds to when the SK Modified division concept was introduced here to the Stafford Motor Speedway, and he was around for much of that.
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting to get Jerry's take on the transition, the competition. He raced at a lot of tracks. He raced at tracks that I imagine a lot of our listeners have never even heard of before, like Norwood and
Danbury,
Westboro, Danbury, Plainville, Savin Park, or there's so many. Like, you probably don't even know what Savin Park
I do
was.
not.
West Haven Speedway at an amusement park on the beach. I never heard of it until yesterday, and I guess Jerry might have raced there.
We'll ask him here coming up in a little bit. We are in the middle of the off season when we're taping this show, and thankfully, I think the number to the Napa Spring Sizzler is getting smaller every day.
We're in 2020. That means we're getting closer to race season.
We've cleared the holidays, so now we can look forward to some racing on television here these next couple months with Speed Weeks around the corner, and then the Napa Spring Sizzler. But there has been, as there always is, some off-season news. I know car registration is approaching 200 cars right now.
Yeah, it's exciting. We've had almost 200 teams put in per number across 5 divisions, as well as our 2 open events. So that's the modifieds and the pro late models. So yep. 200 teams already have a number in. It's only January. There's typically an influx around March and April. So it's going to be a great season at Stafford. There's already been some great stories out there. Just announced Chase Dowling is back in an SK at Stafford. Winner of the 2016 SK 5K. Just lost the 2017 track title to Keith. So he's back, and he's behind the wheel of an interesting car.
Going to run with Dan Avery's teammate to Glenn Reen, I believe, for next season. So that team stepping up. And Dan, who occasionally would drive that car, says he's not completely done as a driver. He's going to run some events as well. I believe up to 10 races between here and at Stafford. So that's going to be a team that I think can challenge Ronnie and Keith for the championship. We're going to have at least 8 or 9 guys that can run for the track title.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I know Chase does. He has committed to the tour full time, so he will probably miss at least one event. But you never know with
weather,
rain outs. But that's going to be a winning car out of the gate. You got Michael Sullivan on. He's going to be the crew chief on that car. Former Ted Christopher crew chief. That's all great equipment, and Chase is going to be in victory lane again.
Absolutely. Going to be one to watch here in 2020. One other story we want to touch on before we move to Jerry Pearl is Damien Palardy moving up from Monday night competition, Wild Thing Karts, into a limited late model for this season. And again, it's another one of these young kids, that Monday night program here. One, if you've never been, you have to see it because it's some of the best racing you'll see all year. But two, that stepping stone. Once again, I feel like half the drivers on Friday night started their careers in karts on Monday nights.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible how many drivers have gone from the karts either into Legends or into SK Lights and then eventually into the SK Modifieds or the late model division. So Damien's just another, he's another driver to move up. He's going to be driving a limited, which is a challenging transition from a go-kart, single gear, not a lot of power, to a big, heavy stock car. So he ran 2 times at the end of the year, and he says he's going to take his time. But I imagine after a week or two, he's going to be, I want to be on the podium and I want to be up front.
Ran a couple of races at the end of last season, ran the Junior Outlaws the last couple of years here on Monday nights. A great field of karts there. And if you have never been to Monday night competition here with Wild Thing Karts at Stafford Motor Speedway, it is a great way to see, I guess, the future stars.
It's a great program
of Friday night racing. I mean, when they put 18 Junior Outlaws out there at the same time,
they're drafting.
And that's what it is.
They're bump drafting,
like their Daytona and Talladega.
It's pretty crazy. Some other great news that's come out is Call Before You Dig has signed on to sponsor our Pro Late Model event, which is exciting. It's going to really up that event, up the ante a lot. They've been a great partner at Stafford for a long time, and we're excited to sign them on and grow that event. So May 29th, it's a new event everyone's excited about. We already got 10 entries in, which some interesting characters in that entry list, including Alex Pearl and Bryan Narducci in Pro Late models. So maybe we'll ask Jerry how he thinks his grandsons can do with full fendered cars.
There we go. We'll have Jerry coming up in a little bit, but the end of May, Pro Late Models and Call Before You Dig coming on to partner for that event. Going to be a great time. I will look forward to getting to that event because then the season's underway here at Stafford Motor Speedway and we can stop talking about snow and cold weather. So
I'm ready to race.
I'm ready to talk about it. In fact, we're going to talk about it next. Jerry Pearl, 2-time SK Modified track champion from the 1980s, joins us next here on the Bottom Shot Podcast. Back here on the Bottom Shot Podcast, Kyle Rickey and Paul Arute, joined by 2-time Stafford Motor Speedway SK Modified champion Jerry Pearl. Jerry, first off, welcome to the show. And have you ever been on a podcast before?
No, I never have been.
Something new for you. Something I guess the new generation is about podcasting. They didn't
we're
have
just
that
trying
back.
to get the stories down.
Absolutely.
Jerry's got a lot of them, so we're gonna have some fun. We have some good tales that Bryan and Alex and Jeff told us, so hopefully we can get all those out. Some amazing stats, though. 2-time Stafford SK Modified champion. Only 6 drivers have done that, which is pretty incredible over, 40 seasons of SK Modified action. 1984 and 85.
Right.
And also a 1993 champion at the Waterford Speed Bowl. So, Jerry, kind of just get us started here. How did you get into racing? And kind of tell us, when did you begin your career in racing?
Well, when I was a young boy, my dad and my uncle owned a salvage yard on 91 in Hartford, and my uncle had a race car from some of the guys that hung out at the yard, and I used to go with them all the time. I was very small, and so I said, someday I'm going to drive. And everybody said, you're not going to drive. And I said, oh, yeah, I am. And when I became 16, I built a car, and it was a bomber, and we went to Plainville Stadium with it. Didn't fare too well, but we had fun.
So what is you think that the 60s? What any idea?
That was
year?
in the 60s.
Early 60s.
Early 60s.
And what is a bomber? I know I've heard the name bomber a lot. There's a lot of divisions. What's a bomber?
It was a car off the street. You put a roll cage in it and a milk truck seat in it, and you had a lap belt, seat belt, and that was it.
A lap belt, a seat belt, and a milk truck
seat. Yeah.
What was that first night like as a driver, pulling into the pits, knowing that you were going to compete in your first race? And did you leave? You said it was a tough night. Did you leave wanting to continue to do it?
Not really. It was kind of rough. It was rough down there anyhow at Plainville Stadium, but an outsider coming in didn't fare too well anyhow. So it made it even harder. And like I say, I ran the first time, and I said, I don't know if I really want to do this. And it took me about 3 weeks to get the car back together to go back, because it was tore up pretty bad from the first night. And we went back a couple times, and we didn't fare well, so it was pushed to the side.
The car was?
Yeah.
So did you kind of take a break from driving for a little bit then?
Yeah, we took a break, and the following year we built another car, and it was a sportsman style car, and we went back and we raced against guys like Danny Galulu, Bobby Black, and
was that at Plainville as well?
That was at Plainville, yeah.
So you go from the Bombers.
Yep.
I just love that name. I think it's a bomb. Like, it sounds like a fighter jet, right? It's probably the polar opposite of a fighter jet.
Yeah.
And you go to this, the following season, you're a sportsman, and you have some, maybe a little bit more success.
Yep.
When do you start to realize that, hey, I'm not bad here. I can do this, or does it take a long time?
It took a while, and then I ended up going to Riverside Park. There was a fellow that raced up there, Dan DeVoe, and he drove for my uncle, and he had a friend of his that had an old car, and he drove it on Tuesdays, and I was going to drive it on Saturdays, and my dad didn't even know I was driving, and I got wrecked going into 3, and I jumped out of the car. Back then you only had a strap holding the door closed, and I jumped out, and my father goes, "That's my son." Because they
was
announced
he in the stands?
He was in the stands, and they had they announced Dan DeVoe was driving it, of course, and I was driving it, and that started me off. After that, he says, "Well, we better build a real car instead of something."
So wait a second, let's back that up here. So you get a ride with this car.
Yep.
And you're running at the park.
Yep.
Up in Agawam.
Yep.
And your father's in the grandstands and doesn't know you're driving, and you wreck.
Right.
But he was okay with it. Oh yeah, it's Jerry.
Yeah. Well, he wasn't okay with it, but he took it pretty well.
Okay. And so from there, then, do you just continue? Do you build a new car? Kind of.
Yep.
Walk me through it.
We started building cars after that, and then I built this car, and we were running Riverside as a modified then, and we were time trialing for the Riverside 500, which was a team car race, and I was teaming with Dan DeVoe again, and the throttle stuck. Normally I ran 6 carburetors on the car. I only ran 4 that week, and throttle stuck. I hit the wall, and I was hospitalized quite
So
a
is
while.
this when you
That was 54 years ago now.
54 years, and this is, I think I've heard this story. This is when you only had your lap belt on.
Yeah. We didn't need shoulder harnesses or any restraints or anything back then, and had the shoulder harnesses behind the seat because I was going to use them for the 500, and I had just a lap belt, and I come down and I bit the steering wheel, and the whole right side of the car was on top of my leg, and I broke my leg, and I was out of work for about a year.
Wow.
After that.
Did you wear your shoulder harnesses next time you went out?
After that, I made. Well, you had to. When I came back, you had to run them.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you've mentioned in our short time already 2 racetracks that unfortunately aren't around anymore in Plainville and Riverside Park. You had a lot more options back then as a driver. What was the mindset of picking and choosing where you guys went? Obviously, we haven't even mentioned Stafford yet, or Thompson, or Waterford, because they were all back around in that era as well.
Correct. I used to come to Stafford a lot because my friend Gene Bergen,
Yep.
his dad owned a garage in Hartford, and him and my father were very good friends. He was a mechanic also, and so he helped me get started more or less, and I always idled Gene Bergen, and I mean, after he stopped racing, I used to go visit him even after that. Yeah. It's really, the era. I mean, Gene drove with a lot of great people. I drove with a lot of great people. I've raced with the best. I mean, Jeff Bodine, Ron Bouchard, Richie Evans, Jerry Cook, Charlie Zombak. You name them, I've raced with them.
It's pretty incredible. We were just pulling up the 1977 Spring Sizzler, which was your first Spring Sizzler start, and Maynard Troyer is the winner.
Yep.
And you run down the list of who was in that event, and you literally raced against everyone that everyone talks about now as the greats, and you were there, but then
Yep.
your career also spans into the next generation of drivers like Bo, Ted, and even it's pretty incredible that it can go across so many different types of racing.
Yeah. Back then, racing was a lot different, though. A lot of the cars that we had back then weren't as safe as the cars they have today. I mean, we raced for a lot of years with, like I say, with a milk truck seat, and then we went to fiberglass seats, and we made our own seats. And
You think NASCAR would approve those seats now?
I don't think they would be allowed in the pit area, never mind on the track. And like I say, years ago, the doors were held on with straps, buckles. Some guys used chains with a bolt in them. It was really weird.
So, we talked about you started at Plainville, you go to the Bowl, and you stay at Plainville, you end up in a Sportsman, you're at the Park.
Yep.
When do you transition to running a full-fledged modified?
Well, I always had that in mind, and I tried a few times running a modified, but didn't have very much success. And then I got hooked up with the 33. Pete and Bob, and they were at Stafford racing, and they had a fellow driving for them that drove a midget, and he was wrecking a lot. And I was walking through the pits one night, and the transmission messed up in it, and they were going to load up and go home. And I says, "What are you doing?" Because I knew them, because they lived not too far from me. And they said, "Oh, we're all done." I said, "Well, you got another tranny?" And they said, "Well, we got one in a trailer, in a back of the truck. And I said, well, let's put it in. And they said, oh, it's too much work, and blah, blah, blah. I said, I'll do it. So I did it. And we put the tranny in, and he went out and he wrecked again. And so they said, Thompson's tomorrow. That was on the week, Friday night. And they said Thompson's. On Sunday. So they said, you wanna go with us to Thompson and see if you can get this thing to go? And I said, sure, I'll be glad to drive it. And so I went with him and Thompson, and I started driving it after that. And I stayed with him until 1987, I believe.
Wow. So that when was that a moment in the pits? Was that in the early 80s then?
Yeah, that was it was before the 80s.
So wow. So you were.
Yeah.
So this is
it was
the
like
team,
79 or so.
Great. So this is the team that you won 2 Stafford titles.
Yeah.
With. So talk to us about Stafford and the SKs then, because I'm looking at this picture behind you and I'm seeing Jerry Pearl, Ted Christopher, Bob Potter, yep. Wayne Dion. It must have been a heck of a place to run.
Yeah, it was. It was the Cadillac of places, and we always ran short tracks at Waterford and stuff. And when I came to Stafford, it was like, well, when I came in '77, drove a big block modified here, it was like, wow, what a difference. And I couldn't believe the straightaways. I said, this is unbelievable. And then we went to Thompson. We kept switching back and forth. And then when I went, I raced with Bob Potter at Waterford. I raced with him at Stafford. He became a very good friend of mine. And then, of course, Bo Gunning came along, and the Christopher brothers, and there was a lot of competition here at Stafford.
And part of it, an era, kind of a transitional era here at the racetrack, going from the big block modifieds, the tour types to the SKs. What was all that like for you as relatively still young driver, trying to make a name for yourself? Well,
the thing was, we didn't have the sponsorship that a lot of fellows did have, so it was kind of hard for us. I mean, I laugh when I see people over at the tire truck week in and week out. I mean, we ran tires 4 or 5 weeks and didn't think anything of it. Mm-hmm. We were on a low budget, as you could say, and it was a lot. The era was a lot different. The money was a lot different. The salaries were lower, of course. Everything was a lot different back then. I mean, it just multiplied right now so much. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. And so when you're driving the modified to Stafford in the early 70s, you're going against some of the best in the business. How were you able to, with a low buck team, how did you guys even, put the pieces together to run against a Richie Evans and a Jerry Cook who they got unlimited budget?
You hoped that you could. Well, back then they called me Coast and Collect because I was always.
Wait, what was that? Coast and Collect?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was always there at the end. I'd always got in the show one way or another, and I always seemed to manage to stay out of trouble. And like I say, the 33 car, when I drove that car, the bumpers were welded on. They weren't bolted on like they are nowadays. And that bumper had to stay on there for quite a while because it was a lot of work to cut the bumper off to put a new one on, or front horns or whatever. It was a major achievement to do that. So you had to survive, more or less, and that's what I did. And one of our friends, Nick Dinsmore, he built the motors, and when we ran big blocks, we had very good success with that.
Started here, like you mentioned, in the late 70s. 4 years later, you got that first win, May 20th, 1983. What do you remember about that night and your first trip to victory lane here at Stafford?
Well, I should have had a lot more wins than that, but like I say, that win was very big for me, for the team. They raced a lot of years and never really won. They had very much success in drag racing. Pete had his own altered car with a gas mask and the whole bit.
Oh wow!
And it was one fast car, and they got into racing, and they really didn't have that much success. So when I started driving for them, I said, I'll try to turn it around for you. And we worked real well together for a lot of years.
So that night where you get that first Stafford victory, do you remember who you were running against or who you beat out?
I think that was with Charlie Savage, and because Charlie Savage was the first one that ran SKs the first year, and there wasn't that many cars. And then the second year is when Bo and I came along, Johnny A came along, Shawansky. There was a lot of us that came the following year because we wanted to see what it was going to be like after.
So that's a good segue, because I know I hear a lot of stories just being at the track, and my father being around it for so long, is that change from the modified to the SK almost put this place out of business.
Correct.
Because of the boycott. So I would love to hear your perspective on what, as a driver and as a team, what you thought of that change, and was it the right move at the time, and kind of what your take on it was.
Well, the thing was, back then the SK cars were a stock motor style versus a store-bought big dollar motor.
Mm-hmm.
And my friend Nick, that built my motors at the time, he was involved with L&L Auto Machine in Groton, Connecticut, and they massaged the motors, blueprinted them is what they did, and we had a real good piece. And we ran against, like I say, Ted Christopher, Mikey Christopher, you name it, we ran against them. Wayne Dion, Johnny A, and we did very well through that era.
And so do you think the transition into the SK in the region was the right change at the right time, or?
Well, they put it this way. At the time, the motors were starting to cost way out of control for what we were doing, and they had to do something to change the era, and I believe that was a good thing to do.
Interesting.
That kept everybody on a same playing field, and if you didn't have the money to go buy a $20,000 motor, you could build one yourself and be competitive. So, I mean, it's just like now with the SK lights. I mean, it's a stock motor, and I think it's a good thing for the new people coming into the sport that can't afford $25,000-$30,000. That's some can, some can't.
Yeah,
and
it's pricey. It's pricey, and even back then, we're talking about the SK era here, beginning in the early 1980s. Then the Tour comes into play, I believe, in 1985, under the NASCAR banner. Was there ever a dream to go tour racing at that point for you? As obviously you're,
He's like, what's the tour? I don't
Right.
even do that.
We had like a little tour going
Yep.
way back in '77. I mean, I went to Trenton, I went to Poconos. We ran Thompson 300. We ran Stafford. We had our own little tour. You know, we didn't go. I never went to Martinsville. I never went to a lot of those places, upstate New York and things, because I couldn't really afford to do that. But I did go to, like I say, I made a big plunge and went to Trenton. I went to Poconos. I went to, Thompson, Stafford every week, and I ran Waterford with my own car.
So did you compete at Stafford, Thompson, and Waterford every week?
Yep.
Wow, with the same car?
No.
Okay, but you were able to, run 3 nights a week.
I ran the 33 car at Stafford, and I ran my own 43 car or the 9 Diamonds, whichever one I had at the time, because that was the 9 Diamonds was my brother-in-law's car most of the time, and we ran together.
The 9 of Diamonds.
I was going to say, explain the 9 of Diamonds to us for those that may not know the story.
That was a car that my brother-in-law had. Actually, it was the first one was a Hudson body, and we brought it to my parents' home in Bloomfield. And it was just going to be, put it together. It had a 6-cylinder with 2 carburetors, and I got it in the garage. My father looked at it, and before I know what happened, he had the torch out and cut it up.
He didn't like what you were working with?
He says, "You're not driving that car." He says that. So we built a whole brand new car and put that body on it, and we ran that car. And my brother-in-law, he had drivers, Dan Rock, a couple other guys that ran at Riverside, Monadnock. But, yeah.
So you said it was a Hudson body?
Yeah.
So so you cut it up.
Yeah.
So what does that even? I know we can picture the nowadays what that looks like, but what does it look? What is it like? How, like it's a coupe, but like what did you put it together with? Did you go out in your father's salvage yard and pull all the pieces?
No, we ended up getting a '55 Chevy frame, and we built our own suspension and everything on it. And my dad was a very good welder. He worked for a crane company at one time, and he used to weld, and he didn't have to look. He just put the welder on there, and it'd go right around the pipe. And he built the cage, and we put the car all together, and we ran that car for quite a while.
Wow.
And then my brother-in-law and I, we parted ways, and he got other people to drive it, and then we ended up building a brand new Cavalier car, and then we separated a few other times.
It's racing, right? You
That's
get together, you break up. You get together, you break up.
Well, he lived in Bradleyfield, and I lived in Colchester, so it was a commute for. If it was at his house, it was a commute for me to go there, and if it was at my house, it was a commute for him, and it was too much friction doing that.
So that's what's always amazing. I was looking at the roster of the second or third Sizzler. All the different body styles. It's pretty incredible. There's got to be 20 different types of cars.
Oh, yeah.
And I just can't even really picture what the racing even looked like, because now all the cars, they look the same, which they look cool. I love modified just like everybody else does, but I can't picture a Hudson and a coupe and a Chevalier.
Yeah, back then, most of the guys had Vegas and Pintos and coupes, and I mean, there was Dodge coupes, and there was Ford coupes and Chevy coupes, and I mean, I remember Fred DeSarro had that number 3 with a little puny windshield in the thing, and I'm going, wow. I mean, when I used to come to the races and watch him race, I go, wow. I couldn't believe it. And in some of the cars that Gene Bergen drove way back when, I used to go with him, and you say, wow, you're going to drive that car? And, oh, yeah. And he'd win with it. And then they had a sprint car, and him and Buddy Krebs. And, I mean, I raced with Buddy Krebs. I raced with Giacomo Giacomo.
That is the all-time greatest name in racing.
Yep, Giacomo Giacomo.
Giacomo.
Yeah. Jerry Humiston. Yeah.
So you raced since the early 60s. You ended your career in 02.
02, yep.
So if you had to name the top 3 drivers you think were the most talented guys you drove against in your career, who would you pick?
Well, I think, of course, Richie Evans. Stefanik was very good, too. I mean, he could do almost anything. He could build his own cars. Flemke was another one. I mean, there were so many people that were talent. They had real good talent, and it's unbelievable.
On that same note, when you were first getting into the sport, who did you look up to, and who did you want to try to emulate yourself after?
Gene Bergen.
There you go.
And why is that?
Well, I knew of him, and when I was probably, when I first started going to race, I was about maybe 8 years old, and we used to go to Manans, New York, Pine Bowl, Waterford.
Never even heard of the Pine Bowl.
Yeah.
Where's that?
In New York.
In New York.
Cherry Park.
Okay, that was in Avon.
Yep.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. Eastern States Expo.
Yep.
And Gene Bergen ran all those places, and I went with my uncle because he had the car, and whenever Gene would have a problem with the car he was driving, he'd jump in my uncle's car and go out and blister the field with it, you know, and it was just amazing that he did what he did. But he didn't know a spark plug from a rear end.
Well, that's interesting because we had Keith on a week ago, and he was kind of talking about how the from his era to now, from his early days to now, the drivers don't know what like the spark plug to a rear end. But then you're going back to the '60s where Gene Bergen doesn't know what that is.
No.
So he wasn't a mechanic.
No. Gene had a parking lot down where the Constitution Plaza is in Hartford. They used to park cars there. The people in the city used to have to park their cars, so they used to park in his parking lot, and he'd lock up their car. And,
wow.
Yeah.
And so for some of our younger listeners, kind of who was Gene Bergen? You know, he raced everywhere. I know the name. I don't really know a ton about him. Kind of.
He was very good in his era. He drove sprint cars. He drove midgets. He drove, you name it, he drove them. And he was my idol.
That's awesome.
Two-time track champion here in the 84, 85.
Yep.
What do you remember about chasing a championship here at Stafford back then? And who are some of the guys that you were chasing and those guys that were chasing you?
Well, of course, it was Bo Gunning, Johnny A., Shawansky, Bob Potter, and then, like I say, Ted Christopher came along, Mikey Christopher. When Teddy first came to Stafford, he had bought Art Berry's one of his old cars, and he was having trouble one night. Thing wouldn't run, and I had my friend Nick. I says, "Go over there and help him out." Now I'm saying to myself, was that a good idea? Nah, all right. So, because it wouldn't run right. he went over there and he worked on the thing for about, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes, got it straightened out, went out and beat me. I said, oh, that was a mistake.
Look where you started.
But it was good. I mean, everybody tried to help each other back then. I mean, now things are a lot different. I don't know. I don't know if I would have helped them or not. But things like that, you know, you help the competitor.
Yeah.
When in '85, when it came down to the championship, there was like, I think 3-4 of us that could have won it. Johnny A, Dion, myself, somebody else in there, I can't remember. Gallup, I think, was in there too, to be honest with you. Rickey was a tough competitor in his younger days. And we all, I mean, we ran together everywhere as we went.
And then we roll into 86, and I guess it almost all ended for you, one afternoon at Thompson?
Yeah. At Thompson, it rained all day, and they were going to cancel, and it stopped. So we went out there on the track, and we're coming down. I always tighten my straps.
You learn your lesson?
After the Riverside deal.
You learn your lesson on the straps?
Yeah, I learned my lesson. So when I come down for the green, I always pull down extra hard on the straps. And Brooksy was the starter at the time, and he always used to see me, and he'd just shake his head because he know what I was doing. And we come around, took the green flag coming out of 4, and got hit in the right front and turned the car. And they used to have a wall that came out at Thompson. I caught it with the left side of the car and flattened it out pretty good and broke my ribs, collapsed my lung. I was in a hospital for a couple weeks. And doctor told my wife that if I made it through the night, I'd probably live, but it wasn't looking too good right now. So they covered the car and took it away. But that was my brother-in-law's car. It was a car that we had put together. It was a real good car, but of course we didn't have the rib protectors and stuff that we have today. The seats that you have today cost more than my whole car back then.
Safety. That's one thing that I look back in the history of books, and how many drivers were injured badly or even killed back in the 60s and the 70s is pretty incredible, and we lost some really big names. And as a driver, how do you keep going? I know, drivers now, thank God, the cars have advanced a lot, but we can't even imagine that.
Well, back then, the pipes on the front of the roll cage used to go straight out, and it reinforced it a lot more, where now you have to have a bend in them, so it's a safety factor, like a crush thing. The bumpers aren't as strong as they used to be.
For worse or better, right?
way back when, I mean, they were welded on. You didn't have a bolt in them. It was part of the structure of the frame, and when you hit, it shocked your body. Is what it did. I mean, now you have collapsible steering shafts. You have a better steering wheel. I remember my favorite steering wheel when I raced was out of a 60 Falcon. I love them old steering wheels, but you can't even get that in a car today.
No.
So as a driver, though, like, how do you get yourself in the mindset to say, oh, I'm going to go race and just not even be concerned about crashing and seriously getting injured?
Well, to be honest with you, if you're worried about getting hurt or whatever, I don't believe you should be out there because you're definitely going to get hurt. Something's going to happen. It might not be planned, but when you're really thinking about things like that, it's not good. Yeah. When I used to bolt into the car, I didn't think anything of that, and I'm sure most people are the same way. If you're thinking about something, and it's just like walking out in the street. If a car's coming down the road, you know that you best not walk out in front of that car. Well, if you do something stupid on a racetrack, and something's going to happen to you. That's all there is to it. It's all up to the individual.
Let's transition to the bowl. Obviously found some success at the Waterford Speed Bowl. Jeff, made a name for himself down there at the bowl as well, and in the 71 car. What originally brought you to the bowl? And then obviously you found, victory lane quite often there in the 90s.
Well, my uncle ran there a lot. Back when we used to go there, they didn't have Route 2 or Route 11, and you had to go through Glastonbury over to apple orchards and stuff. And a couple times the trailer hitch broke off the car, and we had to drive the race car to the racetrack.
That's become a theme here on this show.
And
we don't get pulled over, right?
we made it all the way. We unhooked it at Harry's hot dog stand in Colchester, and we just chained the trailer to the car, and the driver came along, and he was following us, and he got in the car and jumped in it and started driving just like he was driving a street car, but it was a race car. Drove it all the way to the Speed Bowl. Did it twice that I can remember with my uncle.
I can't even imagine that.
Yeah.
Wow.
That was a flathead Ford, of course, and we put two same size tires, front and rear on it, so it would drive good.
Well, otherwise you're a little sideways going down the road.
Well, back then you ran the left front tire was, I don't know, a 550, 15 maybe. It was a little dinky tire on the left front. You couldn't drive that down the road. But we made it. I mean, then we had the welder weld the hitch back up and snapped it right off.
That's funny.
Yep.
And so you're driving at the bowl. This is the 90s, and obviously racing has changed a lot since you got started and since the 70s. And
yep.
You're racing against your son at some points there too. And
yep.
Kind of, what's that like? Your son found a lot of success down there. What's it like driving against him?
It was kind of different. I don't know. Some people say I gave him a break now and then, but I mean, one night we lost a hose and we both got wrecked. And Father's Day we spent all day in the garage fixing his car, and it was pretty good. I had a good sponsor in was it 93? We won the championship. Ended up with Porter and Chester for a sponsor, and matter of fact, Dan Avery is the one that got the sponsorship for me, and I thought it was a joke. I was at my shop on a Saturday, and phone rings, and I answered it, and the guy says, "This is Dan Avery." I says, "Yeah, right." I said, "I don't think so." And the guy goes, "Oh, yeah, and this is Dan Avery." And I says, "Yeah, what can I do for you?" He says, "Would you like some sponsorship?" I says, "For where?" And he says, "For the Speed Bowl. Porter and Chester would like to sponsor a car at Speed Bowl." I says, yeah. And I'm saying, nah, this isn't true. So he says, well, be at the school Monday morning at a certain time. I says, okay. I hang up. I call my wife, and I says, you never guess what just happened. I tell her, she says, oh, it couldn't have been him. I said, well, no, it did sound like him. But it was true. I went up there and got sponsorship, and we won the championship that year.
Yeah, and they were a partner of yours for a while, right? For a couple
quite
seasons?
a while. Yep, quite a while. Yep. And then, matter of fact, they sponsored my son, one of their other schools that they had down in New Haven, for a while. And we ran together, and then we didn't have that many people helping us anymore, so everybody was starting to get older and everything, and I said, well, I can't keep doing this.
So that's a good transition. So what causes, you've been driving for your whole life.
Yep.
And what kind of drives you to call it quits and retire?
Well, my success was starting to back off. I didn't have the equipment. Everything I was doing was going wrong, and I wanted to help my son along. Figured bring him along the way, and that's what we ended up doing. I ended up helping him towing his car and working on it, and that's how it ended up.
And so, kind of talk to us about current day, right? So you
Welcome the grandkids.
So there's two of the top SK Light drivers in Connecticut and New England. I'd say two of the up and coming stars of the modified ranks. Bryan Narducci, which everybody knows, and Alex Pearl, who's starting to click off some victories here at Stafford. Had two last year, I believe.
Right.
What are you doing with both of them, and kind of how do you see their progression coming along? I won't make you pick which one is better. I'm not even going to put you on the spot and do that, because I know they're both going to listen to this. So,
Bryan started first, driving late models and stuff, and Alexander ended up going to Monadnock with a mini stock. Well, Young Guns first, and then a mini stock, and they were both in the go-karting, and it was kind of hard watching the two of them, and you can't really choose one over the other, and Bryan is a little aggressive, and Alexander does drive similar to the way I did, but he's doing a real good job also. And Alexander's car is at my house, and of course Bryan's car is at Todd Owen's place. I used to go up there all the time, but my foot's been bothering me a lot lately, and matter of fact, I'm going this month in to get operated on my ankle, because last year a few times I had all I could do to walk from the stands to the car, and so hopefully I'm going to get that straightened away this year, and I'll be able to go to all the races.
Yeah. And so you think Alex is a similar driving style? I caught that. You think that's the coast to?
Well,
what was your nickname?
Coast and Collect.
Coast and Collect. I can see Alex Pearl as Mr. Coast and Collect.
Alexander thinks a lot before he makes the move, where Bryan, he makes the move and then thinks about it. But, I mean, everybody's got their own way of doing things, their own style, of course. But they're both doing very well for beginners. And they have a lot better equipment than I had when I first started, that's for sure.
Yeah. And if you're looking, so you're in the pits every Friday. You have been for the last 4 or 5 seasons since Bryan and Alex have competed. What's your perception of current racing, and is it similar in any way? Is the racing more competitive, less competitive?
Oh, the racing nowadays is I mean, of course you don't have Rickey Evans and Cook and Ray Miller and all those guys, but you have some good competition. I mean, you got Keith and you got Michael Christopher and Williams, and there's 10 top-notch SK drivers out there. And the SK Lights, I mean, there's quite a few cars, and I guess there's 40 cars, I think, signed up for this year for SK Lights. I mean, that's unheard of. I mean, 40 cars. I mean, I haven't seen 40 cars sign in a class since Thompson 300s years ago.
Yeah, it's a pretty deep division in those SK Lights. And
correct. The SK Lights are I mean, if you can't afford a SK, that's a class that you can run. You can afford to run it, and it makes things a lot easier on yourself.
And it also allows for these younger drivers like Bryan and Alex to get their feet wet in a modified before making that big jump to the SK.
Yeah. If you take a beginning driver and put them in a SK or a tour car or something like that, it takes them a long time before they get adjusted to it. And at least the SK Light, they get used to the tires, they get used to some horsepower, not as much as other ones have, but basically they're the same car.
So you've been coming here for most of your life.
Correct.
On and off. Do you ever find yourself in the pits currently on Friday nights kind of reminiscing about the old days? And yeah, we used to park right over here, because the pits, for the most part, I mean, I guess they've changed a little bit. You guys used to pit on the backside at one point, but any reminiscing at all when you're here on Fridays?
Oh, yeah. Well, when there was dirt, we used to pit on the third turn.
Right.
There used to be a big tree there, and I used to stand on the edge of that big tree because I was always afraid there was a car going to come into the pits. And anybody who wanted to find me, they knew that's where I'd be. And when I started driving the 33 car, we used to park where Tommy Fern parks now. Mm-hmm. And it's just weird that all we are just down a few from that, opposite the Hoosier truck. And, I mean, I still walk into the stands, the pit stands, by the bathrooms. I go, now and then I'll go in this main stands, and I'll go all the way down and stop and talk to Bob Potter and stuff. But I guess I'm not going to be able to do that anymore. But it's going to be different this year, I think. I really do.
Yeah, that's a kind of a good point there too. With Bob was a teammate and a friend of yours for a long time, and you guys were teammates and maybe even rivals in some capacity, but a friendly, I guess you'd say, friendly rivals. But you two, your careers were very in parallel.
Right.
And Bob was kind of one of the reasons that we started the show, because you know how Bob is. He had all the stories, and he was one of the ones I wanted to get on here, but obviously we didn't get the chance. But kind of talk to us about your being teammates with Bob.
When I was with Bob, Roger Bonville owned the cars, and at first they were funky cars, and the car that Bob was driving was going to be the one I was going to drive, and Bob's new car wasn't ready at Flemke's, so I drove Freddie Doolittle's car at Waterford, and I drove it at Monadnock. I think I drove it somewhere else too, but Freddie and Bob, they were real tight, and the 51 car was kept at Freddie Doolittle's all the time. And but Bonneville's, we always, after the races, we'd go there, wash the cars, have a beer or two, and then go home. And we did that every week, no matter what happened, good or bad.
Yeah.
We went to Poconos. Bob got wrecked. I ended up finishing. We all helped each other load everything up. But it was Bob. I used to see him during the week. He used to be down at Freddie's, and I had a garage down the road. He used to stop by and visit. Freddie Doolittle used to stop by every day, 12 o'clock. That was his time to come there.
And so with Bob passing at the end of the season this year, you actually got behind the wheel of one of his old cars and paced the SK Modified field at the final,
Yep.
which I thought was incredible, a moment for the history of the track, kind of all bringing it all together. And I imagine that was very emotional, and I imagine it was enjoyable as well for you.
Right. That was really something different. I've never had to do that before, of course, and I hope I don't have to do it again. But Bob, like I say, I used to see him during the week, even up to just before he passed. He used to go to a place, CB Fab in Norwich, Connecticut. He used to keep his motorcycle next door, and we used to talk all the time about old times, and it was pretty good.
All right, I'll change it up now. Rapid fire questions. Are you ready? I just want the first thing that pops in your head. All right. Favorite racetrack?
Favorite?
You don't have to say Stafford, even though you're sitting in Stafford. I want the honest. Like, what was your favorite track to go to? Like, and when you go in the gate, you're like, yeah, this is my place.
Well, I'll be honest with you. I never had a favorite. I liked Stafford. I liked Waterford. I liked Monadnock. I only ran there a few times, and I don't know.
So those are the three then. That's okay.
Yeah.
Fine. How about this? What was your least favorite track? One place where you're like, I don't want to go there. Why?
Trenton.
Trenton. And that place was fast, right?
Oh yeah, it was fast. Yeah.
And how many events do you think you competed in?
I only went there once.
That was it.
That was it.
Yeah, I went to Trenton, and I was driving that 91, and I went down the straightaway. I had a full windshield, and I couldn't catch my breath. And I look out the window, and here Fred DeSarro goes flying by me, and he's got an old mirror out of a truck with a clear glass in it, bubble goggles. And I'm going, what the heck? I got a full windshield, a full rear window, a vent window, and I can't catch my breath. And here's this guy flying by me. What the heck's wrong with me?
And that was a mile. It was a mile track? It was big.
Yeah.
It was
a big circle, I think.
No, it wasn't a circle. You
it
had
was
a
like
dog
square.
leg.
Yeah.
You had a dog
You're thinking
leg.
of Langhorne.
Yep.
You had to come out of, you came out at 2 and headed for some people's house, and you didn't lift, and then you,
Least favorite track is Trenton. Check.
yeah.
Biggest rival of your career?
Biggest rival?
Someone where you said, this is the guy I gotta beat. This is, it's him.
Well, I always used to say I had to beat Ted Christopher, because he was the up and coming.
Most memorable win?
My most memorable win. I'd say probably it's here at Stafford was I forget who wrecked. There was 2 cars. I think it was Bo and Johnny A. wrecked, and I come out smelling like a rose, and I said, yeah, that's the best thing that ever could happen. Because those guys, they had a thing for each other. They were like magnets at one time.
Both were crazy guys, right? They both were nuts.
Well, they I don't know. They were just, it was either Bo or Johnny A. They were, and what was really funny was the fella that was involved with Bo was with Johnny A. What was his name? Civitelli or something like that. I can't remember, but they were together at one time, and it was just weird.
Favorite Cup driver of all time?
Of all
You had to
time.
pick one. You were the 43, so I was thinking it could be Petty, but I'm not sure.
Well, Petty was. I liked Petty. I liked Harry Gant. Harry Gant was my favorite for the longest time. Because he drove a car from up this way. Because that was the Race Hill Farms car. But those were my favorites.
And then I got a good one here. How long until Bryan gets his first SK win?
Oh, boy.
Oh, boy. Some people say he's going to do it this year. I hope he does, but it's going to be a little bit different driving an SK than an SK Light. And he's got a good car. Todd builds a good car. Donnie Wood's motors are doing very well, so he's got a.
So what do you think? Is it going to be this season? I want to hear it on the record if it's this season or is it never or is it next season?
No.
Oh no.
No, Bryan will get a win. I'd say he probably will get one this year.
Okay, we heard it here first.
Look forward to it. Jerry, as always, thank you for taking the time to join us here at the Stafford Motor Speedway. And
we appreciate you coming out, and you're one of the true all-time greats at Stafford, one of only 6 to win back-to-back SK titles, and we appreciate you coming out and telling some stories.
I appreciate you having me.
Wrapping up our second edition of the Bottom Shot podcast here at the Stafford Motor Speedway. Always good to talk to one of the drivers that was here long before us, long before social media. You know, we don't have a lot of that documentation that we have today where we capture every single moment that happens in the pits and the racetrack. So it's always good, and I guess that's kind of part of the concept of this show is bringing in drivers from yesteryear to tell their stories.
No, this is great. It's exactly why, this show came to mind. We want to get these down. We want to get these stories down, and they're fun. It's amazing to see the progression of the sport. And Jerry's a great storyteller, and he's able to, pass along all these great tales. And, man, those sound like some wild times back then.
It's amazing how the sport has evolved, and just life in general has evolved.
It's true.
From the 1960s.
Can you imagine no social media at a racetrack?
Yeah, well, I lived that.
I couldn't. How would anyone complain? What do you write a letter?
Yes.
I guess you probably could.
Which you didn't, and that's why you did.
Dear
you guys
Stafford Speedway, Keith Rocco sucks.
Wow.
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that's what the fans will probably say.
All right. So now let's transition. You're the COO here at the Stafford Motor Speedway. So this is a great opportunity to ask some of those questions that you see people, I guess, expressing their opinion, and some complain about it because that's what the internet is for a lot of folks, is an opportunity to send that letter. That
we appreciate all the feedback. So I call it complaining, but complaining is good. The beauty of social and the beauty of the web is that you get immediate feedback all the time.
Yep.
And so if we have a bad event or a bad call or a bad cheeseburger, we know about it. So I like it.
which means there's interest as well.
Exactly.
So a lot of news up here in the Northeast at other racetracks here during this off season, and it has sparked the conversation of the late model division and the different types of late models that Stafford runs and that Seekonk runs and that Thompson runs, and why any racetrack. I mean, everyone complains or has opinions on why each track runs their late models, but a lot of conversation here at Stafford, and it's not the first time the conversation has come up about why Stafford runs the late models that they do, and they don't adopt late models that run at some of the other facilities here in Southern New England. I give you the floor, Paul Arute.
Loaded question that I've gone probably
I don't even know if
daily,
I asked the question.
probably daily for the last 5 years at least.
Yeah.
But it's the same answer every time. It's that we've committed to our 5 divisions. And in our mind, we've committed to not only the divisions, but to the drivers who have these cars, the teams that have these chassis. And people do tend to, lose track of what actually occurred back 10 years ago. We didn't drop the late models. These are the same cars that used to run at Thompson and Waterford and other tracks. So we've kind of hung with our division, and it's starting to pay off. We had 26 cars in the final, an average car count around 15 to 18 cars a week in the division, and we've changed the tire. We've adjusted some other things, but we've overall made the rules very consistent for the last 5 seasons, which we plan to continue to do. And that's honestly, when it comes to a division, the biggest piece is consistency, right? Yep. At Stafford, you know what you're going to get. We have 5 divisions. Every Friday night, we have an event. You don't have to question the schedule. There's no off weeks. It's the same thing. There's 22 scheduled events, 5 divisions, including the late models. And if you want to come and run, you come run. If not, but in our mind, we have invested in all these classes. We invest in our program. We invest in our facility. We invest in our promotion. And it doesn't really matter if we're racing golf carts or late models, as long as there's a commitment that's clear for the teams to purchase a car and run, that they can expect that in 2025, it's going to be the same. So that's the theory, and I think it's beginning to pay off. I know the 26 guys that compete at the fall final all, appreciate the commitment to the division, and they're excited for the new season. So, and it's a fun car to drive. I also drive one, obviously, but and that's kind of also a part of it. Me driving a late model and David, my brother, driving an SK modified allows for us to really know the true cost. So when I go on Facebook and I see, those promoters don't know anything about the real cost, I have to comment and say, I know more than you probably do, because you probably don't even run a car.
Right.
And we've, between myself and David, have competed in every division. So cost is our utmost importance for the teams and competitors, that as well as equal competition. We want parity. So that's what we pay Tom Fox the big bucks to do, right?
And that's why we have a chock-full pit area every Friday night from April to September here at the Stafford Motor Speedway, because of that commitment to the 5 divisions that have been around now for almost 2 decades, with the limited late models, the street stocks, the late models, the SK lights, and the SK modifieds, and a great program. We're looking forward to getting started in another decade here at the Stafford Motor Speedway. Any other news that you could probably hint us off on here coming out over the course of the next 90 days or so before we get to the spring season? 90
days. We will have an announcement on our street stock special event, the Firecracker, coming out in a couple, probably within the next 2 weeks, which is going to be a great show. Extra distance event for that division, extra money on the line. At the end of the night, we'll shoot some fireworks. It's going to be July 3rd. It's going to be an awesome show. And I think we're planning a lot of great digital content for all our fans and teams. We have a lot of amazing ideas about how to really put drivers in front of the fans, kind of meet who these drivers are. The podcast is part of it, but I think this summer you'll see a big influx in good content to meet drivers, teams, and learn about all things Stafford Speedway.
A lot of great personalities in the pit area every week here at Stafford, and it's been that way for decades. And that's one of our goals is to introduce those personalities to the fans, or try to get some new fans around these personalities.
It's the show.
In the sport. It is the show.
Welcome to the show, right? And so we have to we have to have that opportunity on Facebook, Instagram, and all the platforms to show the show. I hate to show the show, but that's it. It's amazing every week, and the personalities are second to none. Like, you can't make Keith Rocco up.
No, you can't. And there's only one. Thank God. That'll wrap it up for this show here at Stafford. It's been fun. Look forward to show number 3 here.
We'll be back for episode 3 and probably in a couple weeks.
He's Paul Arute. I'm Kyle Rickey. That'll do it for episode number 2 of the Bottom Shot podcast here from the Stafford Motor Speedway.